Good afternoon, my name is Dave Norton from Discovering New England's History. We're going to bring you episode 4 of the Clara Barton story. And of course, she was a founder of the Good afternoon, my name is Dave Norton from Discovering New England's History. We're going to bring you episode 4 of the Clara Barton story. And of course, she was a founder of the American Red Cross. And we'll go to the next slide. And before we get onto this slide here, this is a story that when I got involved in it, I thought it was going to be, maybe I'd have 2 episodes, but she has such an incredible story to tell. Here we are in episode 4, and each one is more interesting than the one before it. So we're going to continue right here. We left from the last episode 3. She made it all the way to the route to Andersonville, from Washington, D.C. to Savannah, Georgia, Augusta, Atlanta, Macon, and finally Andersonville. And it took 17 days to do that entire trip, right after the end of the Civil War. And she was at that time about 44 years old. And the other gentleman with her, Dorrance Atwater, was 20. And of course, Atwater was the one that made a double copy of the Andersonville death list that he kept. And they were on their way to Andersonville to mark all the graves of the soldiers. So we'll go to the next slide. And from last episode, we finally made it to Andersonville. And that's the actual railroad track right there, the one closer to us in the front there. And that's where the train would have stopped. And of course, they've got 7,000 markers already to get started, even though there were 12,000 that died in Andersonville prison. It was a hot day in the summer. Stopped here. They had to unload all the freight cars, all their tools. There was a 40-man Union Army detachment with them to help them out. And on the right there is, when I visited Andersonville, they made up actually a scale copy of a section of what the wall looked like and what the gate looked like. And so they would have walked right in through that gate to begin this process. We'll go to the next slide. And this is a wonderful shot to give you an idea. This Andersonville prison, at one time in August, they had 45,000 prisoners in here. And it comprised 26 acres. And you can see there was a double stockade fence all the way around it. And it was a notorious death camp during the Civil War. The Confederate Army was in charge of it, and all the soldiers that were captured on the different battlefields in the Civil War ended up down here. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is amazing here. This is Sergeant Robert Kellogg from the 16th Connecticut Infantry, and this is his observation. When he got off the train, he was captured, of course, opened the gates that we showed you, and this is what he saw. So I'm going to go with this quotation. I'm going to read that exactly as it is. As we entered the place, a spectacle met our eyes that almost froze our blood with horror. And of course, he's marching in there at a group of prisoners right off the train. Before us were walking skeletons covered with filth and vermin. The center of the camp was a swamp filled with excrement, the scent of which was suffocating. And there's a picture of it on the right. We'll go to the next slide. And you can see how crowded it was, unbelievable. Prisoner rations for the daily meal, they would all gather near the front of one of the main gates. This is what you had every single day. Rancid pork, wormy beans, and cornmeal mush. And if you're lucky, you got, in August 1864, the rations were cut. So all you had is 1 pint a day of boiled rice. That's it. And of course, all the disease was quite prevalent there. Go to the next slide. And that's a picture as it is today with all the markers, grave markers. Only in one section of it. I mean, it goes on and on. And I made some interesting observations here. The annual deaths of New England soldiers. How many New England soldiers are actually buried here? From Connecticut, 315. From Maine, 233. Massachusetts, 768. New Hampshire, 124. Rhode Island, 74. And of course, all prisoners, the total is, or actually, Connecticut is 1,509. And all the prisoners that died, there was 12,920. We'll go to the next slide. Now, what they did, Clara Barton, of course, she's from North Oxford, Massachusetts, and Dorrance Atwater was from Terryville, Connecticut. And this is a great picture because that's what it looked like. Of course, it was all uneven. There's certainly no grass planted there, and they just had hardly any markers on it. But fortunately, Dorrance Atwater is the one that was there, had to make a death list for the commandant at the Confederate prison, and he kept a duplicate for himself. And it was very orderly because he thought something was going to happen at the end of the war, and the Confederacy was going to destroy the list. So he kept a duplicate. And you can see what it looked like. It wasn't really on the grass. It was hilly. It was, and this is what they did. They started putting these wooden markers down because Dorrance had them all identified. And this happened in August 1865. And we'll go to the next slide. And we have a New England connection as well as on my side of the family connection here. On my wife's side, actually, it's a Private James Strawn. He was of the 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artillery. He was captured at Cold Harbor, sent down here. And his number is number 4555. And in August of 1864, he died in Andersonville. And I got two pictures here just to give you an idea. On the left is an actual picture. It shows you how all they did was dig a deep trench, put the bodies in, shoulder to shoulder, close as they could, all the way down. And of course, they had them all numbered. And on the right, that's an idea of the same trench, what it looked like today. And what I did is, if you just look on the right, you can see the person there with the red shirt on. That was my wife, and she's standing at the position, actual position of where Private James Strawn was buried. So he was just laid in the trench just like that. And if it wasn't for Dorrance Atwater, we would never known what happened to Private Strawn during the Civil War. We'd have no way of knowing which battle he was left on. We would actually never know. So we'll go to the next slide. And it's my wife's picture there. And there it is. We found it, 4555. They're all sequentially numbered. Private James Strawn, gravesite. And we were the first ones of all the generations of the family to actually make it to Andersonville at this gravesite. And we'll go to the next picture. Now, Dorrance Atwater, the U.S. military, after they marked all the graves, they wanted the death list back. And Dorrance Atwater was not going to give it to them because he knew they were going to rip it up and destroy it because they wanted to make peace with the country so that the Union side wouldn't get all upset because if they knew how many people actually died at Andersonville. But Dorrance Atwater wanted, in the worst way, to publish that in every newspaper across the state. So they captured him, went through his house, couldn't find it, and then they sent him to prison in Upper New York, where he was there for 3 or 4 months. Now, Clara Barton, of course, was her friend. This was after the Andersonville, after they marked all the graves. And she found out about it, and she has some contacts. She knew Benjamin Butler over on the left, who was a former Union general And at that time, he was the Massachusetts governor, and she knew Edward Stanton, the Secretary of the War. So she went to both of those individuals and said, look, what we did here was amazing, and Dorrance Atwater is the one that helps us out. Without him, we never would have known the identity of all those soldiers that died at Andersonville. And she really got his release. They released him out of prison. So he owed all that to Clara Barton. We'll go to the next slide. Now, what they did, of course, the Civil War was over in 1865. Now it's a year later, in 1866. He had his list, and the New York Tribune finally published it. And that's page 1 of it in the middle there, the Union soldiers buried in Andersonville. And there's Clara Barton and Dorrance Atwater. And that's a great piece of history right here, New England history too. And we'll go to the next slide. Now, what I did was there's many, many pages of the role of the missing men in the Civil War. And of course, you know Clara Barton. She had an office in Washington, D.C., and she was going to determine to find out what happened to all the soldiers at the end of the war. And she had made a list up soldiers that didn't come home, and the family wrote her in her office and asking her to help them out. And she put this list together, 60,000 signatures on this list. Of course, some of them didn't necessarily die in battle or die in prison camps. Some of them, they just probably escaped and whatever, and finally ended up knocking on the door back home. But it's quite a list. So 60,000 she had missing, 22,000 because of this list here, and they found these soldiers alive. And 12,000, of course, were dead at Andersonville. And on this particular, only one sheet of many, many pages. Those missing were in Massachusetts, 99, Connecticut, 39, Rhode Island, 5. And I circle those by color. Massachusetts is in the red color, Connecticut in the blue, and Rhode Island in the 5. We'll go to the next slide. Now, the war is over. The list has been published. And now we're in a situation where Clara Barton convinced Dorrance Atwater that they should just go on everybody wanted to know Andersonville, what happened in there, everything. And so Clara said, we want to get together. And on the left there is a picture a photo of actually one of their train tickets on the Western Railroad, and their signatures are both on that, quite a piece of New England history right there. And so they went around doing lectures. And there's a copy of the poster. This was dated May 29th, 1867. American Hall in Thomaston, Connecticut. They gave a lecture. Both were there in Thomaston, Connecticut. And the title is Work and Incidents of Army Life. And they both told everything that they had accomplished. And see, the admission down there was 25 cents, and the place was packed. We'll go to the next slide. And here's another one. A year later, March 10th, 1868. Dorrance is by himself, and everybody still wanted to see him. They wanted to hear everything about him. They wanted to thank him for putting closure. And this was in Plymouth, Connecticut, at a Congregational Church, Dorrance Atwater, on prison life at Andersonville, March 10th, 1868. So he was doing this to really help out. We'll go to the next slide. Now, in Terryville, Connecticut, that's where Dorrance was. I went by this many times, never stopped, never knew the story, because I was originally from Bristol, Connecticut, and this is 5 miles away, 2 miles away in that area. They had a cannon up on a hill. And they put just recently a sign here, Dorrance Atwater. And that's a monument to him. in Terryville, Connecticut. And we'll go to the next slide. And there's a close-up of the Civil War cannon. And in 1907, they had a dedication of this memorial. And you can see the cannonballs there and the cannon. And Clara Barton came down with Dorrance Atwater. And in 1907, they had this dedication of this monument. There's a piece of New England history. It's hard to believe. A lot of folks really don't know this story. And we'll go to the next slide. Now, his house is still there. I did the research. There's a picture in Terryville, Connecticut, what his house looked like during the Civil War. It's on the left. And on the right, there it is today, up a gravel road, and there's his house up on a small hill. And that's where he was born, Terryville, Connecticut. And that's probably the house where all the Union soldiers surrounded it and went in there and ransacked the house and captured them. We'll go to the next slide. And this is a great picture. It shows Andersonville at Christmas. Can you imagine that? Over 12,000 wreaths every Christmas are put on all these graves. It's quite a memorial. And we'll go to the next slide. Now, Clara Barton at Andersonville, she has her own monument right there with the Red Cross on it. And there's her picture over there on the right. They honored her for all the work that she did. And we'll go to the next slide. And also in the Massachusetts State House in Boston, there's a Civil War nurses monument on the right there, dedicated to all the nurses that helped out in the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. So if you go to Boston and the State House, you can see that monument to all the nurses that helped all those soldiers. And you go to the next slide. Now, the Civil War was over. Quite a few years passed. And her doctor, she actually had all kinds of problems and fatigue and stress and everything else from all the she had been to, which we described in the earlier episodes. So her doctors told her, look, you've got to get out of here. Why don't you go to Geneva, Switzerland, or someplace in Europe and just take a long, well-deserved vacation? So she took them at their word, went by ship all the way across to Geneva, Switzerland in 1870. And, of course, and then she ended up here saying, well, I wonder what this large building is here. She had no idea. It's what they call the International Red Cross headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. So she was curious about that. So we'll go to the next slide. And Clara always, for some reason, has to help everybody, no matter where she is. And so she stumbled on in 1870, they asked her about her interests and what she did. The Franco-Prussian War in 1870. And so she became a nurse on the front lines, helping the dying soldiers. Unbelievable. And that was a war between France and Germany, in which Germany was trying to annex Alsace-Lorraine as a province in France. And on the left, you've got Napoleon III. He was a nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. He was the head of France. And on the right, you got Otto von Bismarck. Of course, he was the head of Germany. And that was quite a battle. They fought over territory. We'll go to the next slide. And it really was quite a... Here's the German army right here. And Clara Barton was a nurse. Totally unbelievable. She helped out the German army here. And we'll go to the next slide. The Franco-Prussian War. A lot of people don't know too much about this war, but They were fighting for the sovereignty of either France or Germany. We'll go to the next slide. And you can see the old style, how they have attack. As long as you can see, there's all the German army attacking. Terrific painting right there to give you an idea. And we'll go to the next slide. And it ended less than a year with a German victory in Alsace-Lorraine, which is a province right on the border between Germany and France, was annexed by Germany. We'll go to the next slide. So she came back. I won't say she was well rested. And she came back to the United States, and then she found out, picking up the papers, that there was a battleship called the Maine. And Cuba was trying to gain its independence from Spain in 1898. Okay, and there's a picture of the battleship Maine, was rushed down to protect our interests in Cuba. And it was either a bomb was put on it or whatever, but no one really knows to this day, but it exploded and sank, and there's a picture of it in Havana Harbor over there on the right. And of course, this was 1898 now, and Clara Barton couldn't stay away again. So we'll go to the next slide. So she got involved with the Red Cross. Now they're wearing Red Cross armbands. You can see on the right there, the soldiers and they're called the Rough Riders, and Teddy Roosevelt was in charge of them, and they were sent down there to protect our interests and to protect our citizens that were actually in Cuba. And that was 1898. We'll go to the next slide. And here's a great picture. This was taken actually in the end of the Spanish-American War. You've got the Army nurses, and that's what they wore. That's their uniforms. You can see the red crosses on their sleeves. And they were a big part of this Spanish-American War. And at the end of that, of course, Spain was defeated. Cuba got their independence. And Teddy Roosevelt was very famous for the charge up in San Juan Hill. And he'll be remembered in history, but I'm sure a lot of folks in history don't realize that Clara Barton was actually there. If you can imagine this. She was there in all those Civil War battles. She was there in the Franco-Prussian War over in Europe. And now she was right on the front lines here in the Spanish-American War in 1898 in Cuba. So we'll go to the next slide. And I did a little bit of research here. I don't know too much about the Spanish-American War, but this monument really struck me. I said, this is a great monument to the Red Cross. And so it was actually now you can visit it. It's in Arlington National Cemetery. And it's dedicated to the Army nurses that helped out in the Spanish-American War. And you can see I took a close-up there. In memory of the women who gave their lives as U.S. Army nurses in 1898. A lot of the nurses were killed in this war, which didn't last very long. But it was an important part of history right then and there. And there's a Red Cross poster right there that, of course, Clara Barton now really was managing the Red Cross now. See, she came back from Geneva and said, you know, that's what we need. That's the International Red Cross. The United States doesn't have anything like that. So I'm going to organize the American Red Cross chapter. And with all my experience and whatever, we're going to start gathering supplies, gathering all kinds of medicines, all kinds of food and everything like that. Set up a whole system. in case there's ever another war, we're going to have everything. I know exactly what you really need. All the bandages, the water purification, chemicals. She knew everything from even that story I told everyone about the kerosene lanterns that the doctors needed to operate at night, ambulances and everything. So she really rolled up her sleeves and once again disregarded her doctor's orders, and she just very impulsive, and she had to do this. That was her mission in life. And a couple items I have right here on my desk. This is excellent here. This book here in Andersonville is very good. And over here, this book, once again, A Woman of Valor. Boy, she certainly was. And it's an amazing story. I mean, talk about eyewitness to history from a woman from New England on all the battles. I mean, Bull Run, Antietam, Fredericksburg, Franco-Prussian War, Spanish-American War. She's not somebody that stayed in the back and just did administration work. She did it all. So once again, this is episode 4 on the story of New Englanders, Clara Barton and Dorrance Atwater, of course. As Dave Norton, have a good evening.